everyone. DJ Noob is with you here with episode 3 with my co-host Edgar Allan Poet for Poetic Carnage, episode 3, sports talk and hot takes. We talk a little bit of NFL, college football, as well as some new. We're going to get a little bit into NBA today. A little bit.
Yeah, much to my chagrin.
But we'll start off like we usually do. We'll do our hot takes with our respective teams. Mr. Poet, of course, Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I am a Denver Broncos fan. But I'll turn it over to you, sir. Did you want to check out the clip first, or did you want to go and talk about it a little bit?
Why don't you fire up the clip?
All right. So basically, I got the clip for this past week's game. Who did you guys play again?
We had the joy of now I can't remember the Saints.
Saints, that's right. Okay.
We beat the Saints.
So we got a highlight reel. It's probably about 5 minutes. So there's the game between the Steelers and the Saints, and then we'll break it down a little bit with Poet giving us his thoughts on this.
Inside give to George Pickens. He's in for the touchdown.
Well, George Pickens comes around right here, and I mean, you can see just a little bit late, there is DeMario Davis, some easy opportunities out there.
Give him a gain of 7 on the play, and now Najee Harris breaks one into New Orleans territory and breaks a tackle to get some more. Down to the 21-yard line. And Najee Harris a little bit shaken up after he barreled over P.J. Williams.
They hit in the A-gap, then they bounce to the hash, then they bounce outside. That's where the big runs happen, and it's exactly what Harris does. And then I love that finish right there.
That was like a little bit of a Terrell Davis cutback there.
He's a big TD fan as well.
There on P.J. Williams, put your thigh on him, run him over.
On 3rd and 7. Pressure from the Steelers. Dalton's got one-on-one. High pointing the ball, but it's incomplete. Chris Olave trying to hold on, and at the last moment, Arthur Millette. Adam Prentice is the fullback in motion to block. Trying to stretch it, and Robert Spillane was the first man in the backfield to get up to Hill. No gain for New Orleans on the play at 2nd down. Dalton feels the pressure, and it came from Alex Highsmith.
Well, he's going to come off the edge.
You probably enjoyed that little moment.
So Highsmith got that sack, and I'm going to talk about him in my rant. But yes, there was that sack felt especially good.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll explain why too.
It's right here, and you watch the spin move inside, gets him with that back elbow.
Need about 35 or 40 yards to get into field goal range, and Kenny Pickett's going to try to pick some of that up with the legs. Dives across the 40 to the 41. Najee Harris is in the game, staying in the block and then release. Pickett steps up, and he's going to take off for a big run. Out near the 40-yard line, Kenny Pickett using the legs again.
That ball a little bit, getting that second window, really nice read.
And now right back to Pickens, this time on the end around for another big run. 3 of the best Steeler runs of the season have come in this game.
Big-time yardage up inside.
Now setting up at the 44. Deep shot, Pickett looking for a man, and he's got Deontay Johnson down inside the New Orleans 20.
There's 2 things I love, right? You get the one-on-one. You see this, the safety just sit in the middle of the field, puts a great ball on Johnson, but I love the eyes of the quarterback, just holding that safety in the middle so he can't get over there.
Dalton stays in the pocket, looks for Landry, off his hands and picked off. It's taken away by DeMonte Casey in his Steelers debut.
And understanding where your help is right here, Wallace, watch him play underneath this route.
I think I did catch that interception on red zone. And they were like, "Oh, well, he's going to end up paying for that football."
Yeah, it was. You get that hyped and you go that hard. It's like when Evans threw away Tom Brady's 600th passing touchdown ball. And like,
Yeah.
would you please give that back? We'll give.
Yeah, it's like, hey, can we just give you something else? And that guy's probably like, fuck
a
no.
selfie. Yeah. There was the guy who gave the record-breaking home run ball back to Aaron Judge. You know, there are some fans who I mean, he really basically said, I don't want $1 million. I'm going to give $1 million back, you know, to Aaron Judge. And I respect it. But yeah, I want that football
game, and they respect the player. So that's
Because why? He knows he's got KZ over the top.
Yeah.
On 2nd and 8. Pickett has Jalen Warren out of the backfield for a first down. He slips a tackle to get it near the 20 and a little bit more. Pickett off the right into the end zone. Touchdown, Pittsburgh.
I will say this, man. The more and more I think about it, and I'm happy for you and all, but if I could redo everything this past offseason, I would have skipped out of fucking Russell Wilson and drafted Pickett.
The more I watch him play, the more I feel like my Tony Romo comparison is pretty spot on. And Pickett's had some 3 interception games, and it sounds weird to say. One 3 interception game was he played really well. 1 3 interception game was not what we were hoping for.
Well,
but he's a talent.
Here's the thing
man.
with that, though, and people often forget this. If you ever go back and look at, it might be Manning's first season, maybe
28 picks.
Yeah, so I mean, it happens. They gotta learn the speed. They
do, and you have to give them, unless they're so god awful, like Deshaun Kaiser level awful. You have
because
to
everyone
give them
keeps
a
saying,
second
like,
year.
like Abe's always like, Jameis Winston's still a great quarterback. No, he's not. He still throws like a ton of interceptions. Like, he's got a good arm, but it's no good if you're throwing it to the other team.
It sucks for him because with Peyton, he was really getting back on track because he was good for a while, and then he got hurt, and there's no Peyton. I think Abe likes him a lot. I do recall Abe saying last year that like Winston's like good enough to be a starter and he's not great, and then it's like you could have him or a guy like Bridgewater. They're in that tier where you take like your preference of kind of a flawed player.
He liked Bridgewater a lot too, and we know where that
went. I liked Bridgewater over Locke because at least Bridgewater can throw a fucking pass and not embarrass himself. God damn, Locke. Horrible. Yeah, those towels.
Great read by Pickett because you got nose up there on the center. He just steps back over to the side a little bit. Remember, earlier he had that conversion right up the middle where he wasn't covered, the center wasn't.
It's still a 2-score game, but New Orleans gets to stay in it because they get the stop on defense. Dalton has it knocked out of his hands. It was Alex Highsmith who chopped it out of that right hand of Dalton, and it'll be 2nd down. Dalton takes a deep shot. Looking for White, and it's taken away! Picked up by Levi Wallace!
That was actually on the wideout, I think.
Well, you're man-on-man inside leverage. Watch him stay in phase, feeling the receiver the whole time, and then when Kevin White...
The defensive side of the ball, but it's been the type of physical game we've come to expect. Another big run. On a day of big runs for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah. So the ball was slightly underthrown. You want your wide receiver to do a little bit better fighting on it. It's a 50-50 ball. They're down by 2 scores. So I don't that actually wasn't one of the worst things that Dalton did. Honestly, in that game, he missed a lot of throws. He missed a lot of progressions. the Saints have a pretty decent offensive line. They're not what they used to be. He didn't utilize it. Dalton used to be a pretty good quarterback. Like, I don't like saying it, but he used to be pretty good.
Mhm.
He's kind of shot now. He's definitely good enough to be if Joe Flacco can be a backup in the league, then Dalton can. But
you could do much worse.
Oh yeah, you could have fucking Case Keenum or Drew Lock be your fucking backup quarterback. Those guys are fucking ass cheeks. So that actually serves as a pretty good segue into my rant. I want to rant positively about everybody on the Steelers except Matt Canada. We'll never rant positively about Matt Canada. I need Matt America, not Matt Canada.
Hey, did you watch the entire game?
I watched. I missed the first half of the first quarter.
So, was Canada's game plan better or still the same?
It didn't feel different.
Okay. So it's more just the players making plays.
It was the Steelers. They won their one-on-one matchups. Is really what the game came down to. Like, our corners played really well. They've been playing well since the Bucks game. The biggest thing is we got Watt back, and that was kind of the central part of my my rant, because you saw Alex Highsmith a couple times in those clips with the fumble, the sack. He had some quarterback hits, hurries. I like Alex Highsmith. He was a steal in the third round. He was like the second round. He was the second player taken in the third round 2 years ago. Nice player. Good talent.
Is he LSU, right?
He Charlotte.
Charlotte, okay.
And so close, like literally geographically close.
I'm just wondering because I think there was another Highsmith that went to LSU. It might be, maybe they're related.
Is it Deontay Highsmith, the inside linebacker from Bama?
That he's on the Patriots. I think.
Patriots, yeah. So Alex Highsmith has 8.5 sacks. He's tied for fourth. That's really good. But here's the thing. Week 1, he has 3 sacks. Okay. Wonderful game. This past week, he has 2 sacks. So he has all but 3.5 of his sacks in those 2 games. What does he have? What does those 2 games have in common? Can you guess? Those are the only 2 games TJ Watt was healthy. So TJ Watt, I love TJ Watt. I think he's the best pure pass rusher in football. Like, if you put up his numbers, you compare him to Myles Garrett, it's a blowout. It's not even close. And Myles Garrett is a bad man. He's a very bad man. He does bad things to quarterbacks, and he'll let them know that he's going to do it to them. They can't stop it. But TJ Watt is historic. We are 1-9 all time without TJ Watt. In contrast, to be fair to Myles Garrett, and I'm only picking on him because he's a Cleveland Brown, and a lot of people think that he's the best pure pass rusher. He's the second best pure pass rusher, and if you think he's the best, you're wrong, and you should feel bad. But here's the thing with Watt, okay? And to paraphrase Tony Romo, he's one of 2 defensive players in the league who has a quarterback-like impact on the game.
Mm-hmm.
He is so magnificent. He's not great in coverage. He's a monster against the run. He can set the edge, tackles for loss. He's incredible there. And he's a monster pass rusher. And when the Steelers have him, we're a pretty good defense. The offense we get gassed out. But with him, it feels like the early 2000s. It feels like the late 90s and mid 90s. He's so magnificent. And he's in year 6. He already has 73 sacks, and he's missed almost this entire year. The guy is just a beast.
Right.
And, for him, for a guy like Highsmith, we had a player from University of Kentucky. His name is Bud Dupree. It took him like 4 years to get on track. Then he had his first double-digit sack season. The Titans paid him a ton of money. He hasn't done anything since then. Highsmith does not have the talent that Dupree had. He's a first rounder. Highsmith has a better motor. He definitely works harder. To be fair to Dupree, Highsmith has been healthier. So with Watt, I don't think that we're going to turn it around and sneak our way into the playoffs. I think we're too far gone. And in fact, in some ways, it might be bad because we're going to have the dead cat bounce and probably lose draft position. But there is something to be said for having a dominant player who looks like he has a real shot at being an all-timer on your team, rallying the troops. And you saw the rest of the highlights. Pickens is a stud. Deontay Johnson is a stud, especially when his mind is right. Najee Harris is a stud. Our left tackle is not great. He's not as bad, I think, as people say. We are a offensive lineman or two and a offensive coordinator away from having a real shot to give Pickett one of the best offenses, personnel-wise to play with. And at that point, it'll be on him.
Key for you guys this year, you're probably gonna, if you keep winning, you'll probably finish around 500. But
yeah,
I think a lot of it's just gonna be, can you stay healthy? Because I know Harris has battled injuries. Pickett got hurt, a couple weeks ago, but I think that's really it. And TJ Watt, same thing. He hurt himself earlier in the year, so it's really just about staying healthy. I think, because if you do, I think more confidence will come up with the Steelers. Kenny Pickett will get better as it goes along, but I think you're right. I don't think they're quite on the cusp of like going to the playoffs.
We needed luck. If we were in that ignominious position, right, where when you start the season and you look at your team and you're like, the best we can do is be as good as we were last year, you're either stoked because you were a Super Bowl contending team, or you're sad because you're either mediocre, bad, or you kind of peaked.
Right.
If Watt had stayed healthy and Pickett or Trubisky, things had gone a little bit better on the offense, we might have been like a 10-win team, not nearly as good now with the extra game. Maybe at best the third wild card. That was our absolute best case scenario. Watt got hurt. Line wasn't as good as we had hoped, both offense and defense. Matt Canada is employed by us, so it was going to be rough. And so this is a year of resetting, recalibrating, and I do have optimism for the Steelers next season. And next season, what I hope is we can look Kenny Pickett in the eye and say, hey, we're going to give you a fair chance to grow and improve. And as long as we do that, if he doesn't have it, then he doesn't have it. It's back to the drawing board. It is what it is. But you're just trying to give people a fair shake in the NFL. And I love me some Kenny Pickett. So that is my positive rant. Shout out to TJ Watt, also known as the God of Linebackers. I kick it back to you.
Yeah, Watt's one of a kind. It's hard to find those special linebackers like Zach Thomas, Ray Lewis, etc. So, hats off to the Steelers finding another Watt.
Yeah, and he was in the same draft class as Myles Garrett. It's hard to find a pass rush duo that good in a single class. So, right. And then they wind up in the same division. It's just kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy.
Well, my Denver Broncos had the luxury of playing the Tennessee Titans this past weekend, and to be fair to Denver, they aren't giving up. They're fighting. They're trying. Defense is playing out of their minds because despite losing, trading away Bradley Chubb, we still managed.
Horrible trade. I hated it. By the way, hated it.
Yeah, who knows what's going on? The last couple of years have been really weird in terms of like player personnel and Patton letting some people go and so
he has a pattern. He definitely has a pattern.
But I'm going to play a clip real quick. I forget who was doing it. Just a couple of people talking about the Bronco game, but it's always coming back to the Russell Wilson thing. So let's check it out. Then I'll get into my rant.
Russell Wilson in town. The Broncos, no team is better than the Broncos off a bye. Ryan Tannehill, he is back after missing 2 games from an ankle injury. And Tim, he's finding Nick Westbrook-Ikhine early in the end zone for a 9-yard score.
And a little bit of passing game and a completion to a wide receiver. I'm sure Titans fans excited about that.
1st and 10. We got the flea flicker. Westbrook-Ikhine get wide open. How did this work out?
Because they have Derrick Henry, and that's another way that he could create production.
4th quarter. when it matters. 20 seconds to go. Broncos down 17-10. Here comes Wilson, scrambling out of the pocket, trying to make something happen. That pass is tipped and picked off by Terrence Mitchell. The Broncos only find a way to score 10 points. They fall to 3-6 on the year. So we got to talk about Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. He had a pair of touchdown catches today in the win. His first 2 touchdowns of the season entering today. All Titans wide receivers had combined for 1 touchdown.
So I just have a question. I want to see how you see it.
Sure.
The pick. Russ throws that pick. Do you feel like he could have scrambled for the first down?
100%. Now, to be fair, there was 12 seconds on the clock. So
getting everyone back to the line of scrimmage
it probably wasn't going to work. And if I recall, I don't think we had any timeouts. I think we'd already spent them. So it was one of those things like
you have to do something. But
the other thing is we can't. At times, it's like you have to concentrate on the sideline. So either you're going to throw it into the end zone or like to the sideline. You notice the receiver was like 2 or 3 yards outside the end zone. He may not even got in there.
Yeah.
So I just, I don't give him a lot of shit for that. But the problem with this game is that we were up 10-0, and then all of a sudden we just second half we didn't know what the fuck we were doing.
But that takes me to my next question for you.
Yeah.
So, with respect to Russ being 34 and battle-scarred veteran and all that, because he deserves that to be mentioned, do you feel like he would have been better off trying to pull a Kyler Murray and just take off and hope to make something happen and juke his way into the end zone, which would be, in my opinion, very unlikely. But between run, slide, try to spike and get a playoff, which seems almost impossible, or throw that pass, which was never going to work, and ignore the sidelines. It feels like him trying to run into the end zone is like a 2% success rate, and it seems like that was the best bet.
Yeah.
And my last question to you, I'm trying to set up your rant. Regardless of the situation with the clock and no timeouts, watching Russ have a bunch of acreage in front of him and not running for it, doesn't that seem familiar?
Yeah.
Okay.
The more I think about his time in Seattle the last few years, like I used to get enamored with his passing to Tyler Lockett, and thinking, wow, he's got a pretty good deep game with that guy. But then I think about it, it's like, well, that was all he really had. You didn't see him throw many intermediate passes.
He can't.
So either they were able to, again, scheme-wise, to fool the defenses into coming up, because they did like to run the ball in Seattle. That's one thing they did like to do. But yeah, just some of the things that I overlooked in Seattle, I'm noticing in Denver is happening. Like you saw it. The middle of the field's wide open, but there's really no receiver there. And it's like, I don't know if it's because they really were trying to concentrate on the outside, but then what's the guy down the field doing? I don't know. I don't really know what the idea there.
Do you remember when the Seattle tried to trade for Julius Thomas and Denver said no, and then they traded for Jimmy Graham.
Yeah.
And they were trying so hard to get a pass catching tight end over the middle of the field.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's one of the best. If you have a strong running game, that's one of the most punishing. It's old school, but it's one of the most punishing ways to take advantage of a defense. This guy's going to block you, and he's going to run out in the middle, or he's going to line up in the slot, and he's huge. And that your poor corner is going to be like, how do I stop this and play against the run? It's awful. And when they got Jimmy Graham, and he was physically declining, and he wasn't the guy who, balled out with Breeze, but he was still talented. He still had some crazy catches every now and again. He couldn't do it. Russ has always had issues hitting the middle of the field. And it just seems like with Hackett's scheme, and Hackett's going to get fired, he has to be at this point, right?
You would think so. But, here's the thing for me is regardless of what happens with the coaching going into next year,
yeah,
Like, I'm willing to give Russ a pass this year for whatever reason, even though I'm not really happy about it. But
Mulligan, yeah.
if he goes next year and still has these problems, I'm going to start wondering if the time that he had in Seattle is more smoke and mirrors. Because you look at what Geno Smith's doing, dude. This is a guy who's been a career backup.
Yeah.
And he's come out and he's lit it up in the same offense that Russ would be in. Same offense.
And it's with almost the exact same players. And I think the thing with Russ too is people we do this thing where a guy becomes a beast and then we treat his career like he was always a beast.
Right.
Russ was a game manager. He would drop some dimes on you, some beautiful deep ball passing and scramble, but he was much closer to, like, I'm not saying he wasn't better than this guy, but his game was more comparable to an Alex Smith than it was an Aaron Rodgers or a Tom Brady, or just in that caliber. And then over time, he became a lot better, which is what you would expect. Like, you get better typically the more you do things. My issue with Russ, and I wasn't trying to give him a pass with Hackett, but one thing that I will say is Hackett, for a guy who's supposed to be an offensive genius, he reminds me of Mike Martz, because Mike Martz had that beautiful offense in St. Louis with Kurt Warner. Then the line left and Bruce left and Marshall Faulk left and all that stuff. And he still tried the same shit with Bolger. And then he became the OC for Cutler in Chicago, and he tried the same shit. It's like the line's bad. 7-step dropbacks and a bad line. But that's all he knows. And so I wonder if, in a parallel universe, if y'all had managed to get Rodgers or drafted a quarterback, how much of these warts would have been covered up. And Russ can't be given, like he's fucking up so badly, and the announcers are calling him out on, he should have ran there. He missed that read. He didn't diagnose the blitzer. He held on to the ball too long. He's doing so many things that, like, in times of crisis, you're supposed to focus on the things that you can control. The things that he can control, he is F- level at, and there's just no other way to put it. Yeah. So I don't believe that report that came out that he's using audibles from Seattle, because that would just mean that he's done zero playbook work. Right. His teammates wouldn't even fucking know what that shit would mean. Right. But if he's really that far behind on the playbook, then someone needs to take away the TikTok machine, and he needs to go study in that private office and stop being Mr. Unlimited. Oh, fuck me.
Yeah, let's get into some more. Let's see.
Reception, that coming from Robert Woods.
We hit some big plays, and every week I'm pretty sure that everybody's intent on stopping Derek. That whatever you just said can go for next Thursday, and then the Sunday after that, and Sunday after that. So we got to get him going. I think that's obvious. Today was tough sledding, and we'll have to get the back going in unison with the line and making good decisions. And
it's called defense.
The reality is we got to find ways to win these games. It's been 5-6 games or so, that are one-score games, and so I got to find a way for us to get 2 more touchdowns. We got to find a way to, I think we got to find a way to get 2 more touchdowns a game. And I think that we were able to do that.
So uncomfortable.
We didn't do it tonight.
All right, so Wilson completed just 50% of his passes today.
For a guy who is so polished and prim and proper, when Pete Carroll took a shot at him and he looked up uncomfortable at that moment, I understood that, because that was classless by Pete Carroll, and it doesn't speak well of him as a coach or as a man. And that was pathetic and uncalled for. That was Bush League. But he's standing up there in the game jersey, trying to project an image, and I can tell he doesn't believe what he's saying. We have to find a way to score 2 more touchdowns. Russ, you can barely get 1. How are you going to get you can barely get to 17 points. How are you going to and I'm not trying to bag on your team, but like that,
dude,
that moment,
our team deserves it. Look, the problem is we just got done spending 5 years after post Manning trying to find a quarterback. And then what was it? You've been here the whole time with us on that board.
Yeah.
We constantly say it's the quarterback, it's the quarterback, it's the quarterback. And then we get a quarterback And guess what? It's the quarterback. I mean, there are other issues. We've always dealt with other issues, but people like to think that when Manning was in Denver that our line must have been the best ever. It wasn't. Manning took hits.
Yeah.
I saw Manning play feigning goat a couple times. He wasn't the same player, even especially down the end towards 2015.
Oh, yeah.
But he was able. He did the homework. He had a quicker release. Manning knew he had to get rid of the ball fast. What happens with Russ is he seems to think he has all day to throw back there. You don't. And it's worse because we do have problems on the line. So what do you do as a quarterback? You have to get rid of the ball.
And you set up the deep because Peyton's first year or two in Denver, the line was okay. You had like the last vestiges of Clady. There were some guys who were healthier, yada, yada, yada. And then it got real bad and he overcame it. And he set up the deep throws because he's a chess player. I don't expect people to be on Peyton Manning's cerebral level, right?
Right.
But what I do expect, like I watched a play, it was almost back-to-back. He drops back, 5-step drop back. Bowles has his guy. He's got his guy. He's got his guy. He's got his guy. Oh, God, please throw the ball. Okay, he's going to break off of me and sack you. I'm going to hold. The board then goes, fucking Bowles, why is he holding? I'm like, he blocked a pass rusher for 5 straight fucking seconds. So he held so his quarterback didn't die. Then the next one, very similar type play. He had his guy blocked for about 3.5 seconds. That doesn't sound like a lot, but the average time to throw the ball in the NFL is something like 2.8 seconds. Like, it's crazy how fast the game is. And finally, the guy gets off of him and sacks Russ, who was drifting towards him, and the board's like, oh, fucking Bowles, he sucked. It's like, that was on the quarterback. That was on the quarterback. Like, you see people who don't understand how holds are scored. Like they're scored in the sense that you held, it's scored if the play stands. They don't decline it. But you see sometimes really great left tackles with a high amount of fucking holds and quarterbacks who either hold on to the ball a long time because they're just trying to make a play, or bad quarterbacks who don't know what the fuck they're doing because they're bad and they're young, or they're a game manager or a backup and they're in there and it sucks. And then like, oh, they gave up the sack. You gave up the sack. No, the sack was on Russ. Now, he's always been that way because he's a playmaker, and that's fine because throughout his time in Seattle, you add up you do the calculation, the equation says more often than not, you're going to fucking come out ahead. It hasn't been that way in Denver, and you can only be so stubborn for so long. I don't get it.
And here's one thing I'll point out, and I'm sure you'll remember. So when Manning was in Denver, like I said, he got rid of the ball faster, and one of the things they did was they used Wes Welker in the slot. So Wes would come across the middle. Now, Manning's a taller quarterback, so that helps. I think one of the problems is because Russ is so short, he can't see. So we're not using any slant patterns. It's not really working unless it's like 15 yards up the field.
Yeah, deep slant.
But you want to be able to take a guy like Hamler, bring him up across like a 5-yard pass and hit him through the passing lane.
Aaron Rodgers made a killing off of that fucking back shoulder.
Brady made a career off of that shit.
Yeah.
So my point is like, unlike Breeze, who was also a short quarterback and knew how to use passing lanes, Russ doesn't know how to do that. So you brought it up that he doesn't use the middle of the field, and that's a problem. You got to be able to use the middle of the field.
He has to, and when he uses them, when he's been successful using the field, it was the few times they didn't really use a whole ton of shotgun in Seattle. And it's not like they never used it. Right. But it was either that or he was scrambling and he saw someone who happened to be in the middle of the field. And I'm not saying, like, I watch Russ, I don't see a guy who's physically washed.
Right.
I see a guy who doesn't want to take hits anymore, I see a guy who's in a bad system for him. I see a guy who's trying to maybe do too much. I see a guy who's kind of oblivious. And I see a guy who I think sometimes is a little selfish. I don't see a guy who physically can't cut it anymore. Right. I'm not watching a shot boxer.
Right.
So
no, he's made some passes that shows you he still has something.
Yeah, he can hit some beautiful plays, and one thing I've always give him, and it cannot be denied, he is a tough son of a gun, and he has. I don't blame him for wanting to take fewer shots in his mid-30s, but you have to find, if you just run a little bit more and keep the defense honest, you will actually take fewer shots that way because they're going to be more reluctant to come up at you. Now they know you're not going to run unless it's literally games on the line.
Well, the biggest thing here is that Russ needs to understand that Denver brought him here to get back to the Super Bowl.
Yep.
And they decided before they watched him play to decide to pay him all that money.
Yeah.
So I know that you can't always predict how seasons are going to play out. You can't get a crystal ball and say, yeah, we're definitely going to get to the Super Bowl, Russell Wilson. But that's what they're investing in. So Russell needs to understand that. So if he's afraid to take hits, he's kind of fucking us over because it's going to happen. This is football. He's dealt with it. All right, let me get some more in this, and I'll finish my take on this shit.
1 touchdown, 1 interception. Played 8 of Denver's 9 games this season. He's thrown 7 touchdowns. Compare that to just 2 years ago when he had 28 touchdowns in the Seattle's first 9 games. Mike, this guy got $250 million. What do you do? How do you fix this offense?
Yeah, it starts with completion percentage. He was 50% today. That is unacceptable in today's NFL. So it has to start with easier completions. And I think they have to really be focused on what worked for him in Seattle. That's what they have to bring more of in Denver. And they're keeping him in the pocket. And even without Jeffrey Simmons today, when that pocket collapses on him, he's an average quarterback. And that's what showed up today.
So is that an injury problem? Is that a coaching problem? Is that a receiver problem?
Yes.
Is that a quarter?
Yes.
Who do you blame? If you have to point the finger at one person or thing, who gets the blame?
Well, listen, I think that you have to look at Nathaniel Hackett first because, as Mike said, it's a player that has a track record of a ton of success, but not far behind. I think you have to look at Russell Wilson. Like there are times where he just isn't playing with, the anticipation that the offense that he's operating in calls for. So I think there's an element of that as well. So look, if this was just off of the Titans game, I think you could say, look, the Titans have a pretty good defense and they've given a lot of teams trouble. But this has been something we've seen all season long. Mike talked about the completion percentage. There's ways to find easier completions, especially with a guy that's seen as much as Russell Wilson has seen. So this, to me, I think, look, the Raiders have been a disappointment this season, but what's happened in Denver, is not far behind. And in terms of the contract, just newsflash, there's no getting out of it for a while because of how the contract is structured. That's a problem for Denver.
Find a way to fix it because that's what you've got.
And on the other side, you got to give credit to the Tennessee Titans. They found a way to get a win with Derrick Henry having 53 yards rushing. That is incredible. Texans
defense.
And the Giants.
Yeah, so
that contract.
I'm not going to spend too much more time on this because I've been beating the shit out of fucking Denver all season long with this series of podcasts that we're doing, but I'll be doing it again a month from now, I'm sure. But either way,
I picked y'all to make the Super Bowl, so I
didn't expect to get there, but I thought definitely a playoff team. Definitely thought we'd be a playoff team.
I saw the 2 pass rushers in the offense that could score points and play ball control, and I saw, in my opinion, Patrick Surtain is the 2nd or 3rd best corner in football, depending on how you slice it. You arguably have the best safety in football. So I saw teams getting down 10 points and Denver's just getting a ton of turnovers.
Yeah, see, that's the funny thing is the past few years, defensively, we've been okay, but we weren't forcing turnovers. This year, we've actually been doing that, and yet we still can't score. And that's worrisome. Your defense is putting you in positions to win ball games, and you still can't get it done.
I cannot believe, and this is what I'll close on. I think Denver came into the league or came into the season. They're like, Sutton's been up and down mostly because of injuries, but he's a good player. Tim Patrick's a good player. Jerry Jeudy is highly talented and he's shown flashes. And so there are some questions on how good those wide receivers could be. But you knew at least two of them should be really good, right? Javonte Williams, a monster. I think that the worst injury that happened to Denver was actually Tim Patrick, because Javonte is probably a better player than Tim. He's more talented than Tim. But Tim is the type of guy who gets open. He's consistent. He reminds me a lot of TJ Hushmanzada or a Joey Galloway, Keenan McCardle, some big playability, but really more of a possession guy. And that's really what Russ could use. And I feel like with Javonte, who Denver just wouldn't run with him. I don't know why they were married to Melvin Gordon so much, and why they're running the ball so few. But it's just something like there are some things that fans don't know and can't understand, and I readily admit that. But there are some things out there that are just so fucking obvious. Like, I don't have to be a car mechanic to know that if my engine's on fire, it's not good. And it sucks for y'all, because I was actually really happy when you got Russ. I thought that it was going to be beautiful. Who knows? Maybe
don't lie. You weren't happy.
I was, motherfucker. I'm not a spiteful man. I'm not a spiteful.
Because you knew going into the season, you guys had Trubisky, and that would.
We paid $6 million for a guy who people thought was going to get 10. And, I thought he was going to be a placeholder, weak starter, a strong backup, and then hopefully Pickett was going to get it. So I thought that if we were going to get anyone, it wasn't going to be Russ, because he didn't want to play. He didn't want to play in Pittsburgh.
For those people that watch this feed, just know that when the feed's done and Poet goes back and behind the scenes, he's laughing his ass off at the Broncos. He's like, "Them fucking suckers!"
No, that is a lie. There's only one team that I consistently mock. It's not even the Bengals. It's not even my old team. It's the Browns, because they're shit and they should be treated like shit. That is the only team that I have any real animus towards. Oh, and the Raiders, because fuck the Raiders. But everyone hates the Raiders.
Well, this weekend there was a couple of really good games. Two surprising games too, because especially, when I saw the Commanders-Eagles game, like when I got close to the end, I wasn't as surprised at the outcome, because I just knew it was kind of writing was on the wall. But I was watching the Bills and Vikings, and I'm just like, after they stopped the Vikings at the goal line, I was like, well, this game's done. And then I think it was you, because like I was watching Red Zone, so they switched off of that, and then I saw you on a board, and you're like, "Oh my God, what the fuck just happened?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So then, like, I go back to the Red Zone, brings it back up, and then that's when Allen fumbled. I'm like, "You gotta be kidding me!"
That was a lot, and
so let's check out some of the highlights from that. Where is it here? There we go.
Of moments yesterday where you're going, this is a great game or a great finish. Sometimes we confuse the two, where you go, Vikings, Bills, what an unbelievable game. Unbelievable finish. I didn't think the first part of the game was that entertaining. Cowboys and the Packers, unbelievable game. Unbelievable finish there. But when you're competing for a Super Bowl, having that elite quarterback is such a difference maker. At least it should be. And Buffalo has an elite quarterback who didn't play that way. In fact, here's Josh Allen after the loss to the Vikings.
It comes down to my shoulders and my shoulders only, making the right decisions, making the right throws, putting our best foot forward in practice. This one's going to suck watching. Only ways forward. We gotta find a way to put this behind us and not let it affect our next one.
All right. This is a team that a couple of weeks ago, analysts were saying, hey, could they run the table? How good are they? It's going to be Josh Allen winning the MVP. Buffalo's going to go to the Super Bowl. Who's going to be able to stop them? And then it felt like they stopped themselves, because Minnesota has a good team. They have some great talent. They have a great running back and a great wide receiver, Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook. They have a good quarterback. They also have a couple of good defensive players as well. Kirk Cousins, it feels like they're going to win maybe because of other players. If they lose, it might be because of Kirk Cousins. Whether that's fair or not, that's how we've assessed him throughout his career. And yesterday, Justin Jefferson had one of the great catches that you ever see. But that was an overthrow. That should have been intercepted. And if it was intercepted, what would we be saying about Kirk Cousins and the Vikings?
Well, I'll stop it there just because he has a great point about how Cousins right now has a lot of talent around him, which was something you kind of always need anyway.
Yeah.
So when he says that pass that Jefferson caught should have been intercepted, well, it was kind of a final gas pass anyway, but that's why you get guys like Jefferson. That's why you go and draft those guys.
Yeah.
And you know this. You're a football fan. You know this. It doesn't matter what team you're talking about. Sure, you're going to get the occasional surprises like Jerry Rice who come out of nowhere. But do you think the Vikings at any point when they drafted Randy Moss did it because they thought he might be good? Hell no. They know exactly what they were going to get, and that's the same thing with Jefferson, you know?
Yeah. It was and the Vikings dodged the bullet with Jefferson. They didn't want to pay Stephon Diggs because they were idiots.
Right.
And they were a Philadelphia correct decision away from getting stuck with Rager, who they now ironically have. That's why I was so hard on Tennessee for trading away Brown just to draft Burks. That's why I was so hard on the Lions for trading away Slay just to draft Okada. It's like, yeah, they're great talents. Okada got really hurt his second year. He's playing pretty well now. But my point is like with Jefferson, you know, I was high on him. I had Judy 1, CD 2, and I had he and Ruggs tied for 3. So
yeah, you whiffed on that one, buddy.
I mean, Ruggs was playing really well, and then he killed a woman. So that's enjoy prison.
He had a bit of a mishap.
Yeah, he fucked up, and I'm not making fun of the woman or her dog who died. It's just like I don't know what else to do but laugh because that was, and it's like going 120 miles an hour in a Corvette in a residential area. You deserve to go to fucking prison, and I don't know what that legal status of this case is. I hope it results in him going to fucking prison because he was, if memory serves, he was incredibly drunk, and he had another person in the car with him.
Well, did he get just let go because he was flashing guns on video or something? It was really weird.
No, that was another high round draft pick of the I think that was a second or third rounder, a cornerback of theirs who was flashing guns on Instagram Live. And yeah, Mayock did not. Mayock was really good at projecting successful players, and then he was really bad at drafting them. So, but to get it back to Jefferson and to your point about it's a last depth or last gas pass. When you throw a Hail Mary and it gets picked off, no one gives a fuck. Right. They only stopped doing that at halftime for the last play because quarterbacks complained it was fucking up their stats and costing them money. Mm-hmm. But no one cares, right? Like when people were like, oh, Pickett had a 3 interception game. You know, 2 were off of deflections that should have been caught. And then this is his first one, unfortunately. And then the last one was a Hail Mary one in the end zone. It's like, who gives a fuck, right? So Kirk Cousins threw up a prayer. Now, Cousins has been often maligned, and I actually was thinking about him earlier because I was doing quarterback rankings. And people will get real upset when people talk about Kirk Cousins, but he keeps getting paid that money because he keeps being a top 12 to 13 type quarterback. And there are some people who, if I was a mean guy, if I wasn't just a gentleman and a scholar and I was a little bit more trolly, I would be trolling some people on the Broncos board right now about Kirk Cousins because he's been a lot better than
you occasionally do anyway, and that's fine. I don't have any problems with like Kirk has a problem when it comes to the second half of the seasons where he doesn't quite.
He has prime time issues. He has prime time issues.
But I'm not gonna ever like blast him for what he did against Buffalo there because. And I know you know this because you're a Stafford fan. When Calvin Johnson was still in Detroit, I saw Stafford throw to a triple covered Calvin Johnson, and Johnson caught that shit and took it to the end zone.
He did it.
You throw to your best player. If you have confidence in that guy, if I'm a quarterback, if I had near the talent any of them do, guess who my receivers are going to be? It's going to be Jefferson.
Let me ask you a question.
You can put the entire defense out there and I'm going to throw it to him.
Right. DeAndre Hopkins does it. Randy Moss. I mean, Moss is so good at it. They made it a fucking verb.
Right.
But who's the wide receiver too?
Where?
For the Minnesota.
Thielen?
Exactly. That's the point. Adam Thielen, he's broken down a little bit. He's old now. They're not even using him as a red zone target. He's really good player.
but he's not fucking Jefferson good.
Yeah, he's not Jefferson good. He's not even Thielen good from 3 years ago.
Right.
Dude was a fucking monster. He and Diggs saved fucking Keenums, and that's the point. The other fucking thing is, I'm throwing a high point ball. My wide receiver is going to fight for it, and he had a chance to come down for it. Okay, fine. I threw it too high. It worked out. But that other big play where Jefferson was in between the corner and the safety, that was a beautiful pass. And a lot of people would say you shouldn't throw that either. Kirk Cousins is an above-average quarterback, and people forget how much of a load he carried in Washington. And at the end of the day, if we don't have the time, we wouldn't really need to do it for my point. But if we broke it down division by division, and I said Kirk Cousins is better than that guy and that guy, we might argue. But the guys that I could, with a straight face, argue are worse than Kirk Cousins would astound some people, and it might hurt some people's feelings. Because I'll tell you what, there's a little guy out in the NFC West that a lot of people are high on, who has way more talent than Kirk, not as good as Kirk. And I don't care that they just gave Kyler Murray a bunch of money. And
actually, I don't know how you feel about it. We'll probably talk about it sometime down the road, but maybe a year or two ago, I thought Kyler was actually kind of the real deal. Now I'm really starting to second guess that.
He's got so much talent, and it's not a mental ability and it's not a physical ability. It's attitudinal.
We'll probably talk more about the Bills in our top 5 rankings because we're going to get to that soon. But the other game I wanted to discuss, because I know you're high on Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, and the Commanders are kind of like an enigma right now this year because at times they look really good and at times they look really bad. But here's a little clip of their little meetup with the Eagles this past week.
Oh my God, yeah.
Would you say losing was a good thing for Philly?
No, I don't think it was in this particular instance because of how they lost. You ran the football for 175 yards on the ground. That's a beautiful thing for you if you're the Philadelphia Eagles. But we all know that this season is riding on Jalen Hurts and where he takes them. We know they've got the receivers. They've got the offensive line. They've got Goddard at the tight end spot. They've got a defense, okay? And so when you look at it from that perspective, the fact that you couldn't keep Washington off the field if you're the defense, combined with the fact that Jalen Hurts didn't have one of his better nights, I think that if you are the opposition, it's a recipe for how to beat the Philadelphia Eagles, and that's what I think you're paying attention to here. It's just one game. I'm not overreacting. I'm just simply pointing out, I look at the manner in which they lost. I never thought they were going to go undefeated. I never thought they were going to go 16-0. We all anticipate, listen, the only undefeated team in NFL history pretty much was the Miami Dolphins in 72. That was all the way. The New England Patriots went undefeated for the regular season before losing in the Super Bowl to the Giants. But let's understand that we usually, because history tells us, you anticipate a loss. It's how you go down. Mm-hmm. And the fact that Jalen Hurts wasn't that great, the defense couldn't keep the Commanders off the offense, off the field. You combine all of that together, and I say that doesn't make for a good loss in my estimation.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, the Eagles were undefeated going in against Washington Commanders this past week. I was quite surprised that the Commanders pulled it up, but then I was also pretty surprised that the Eagles had as many turnovers as they did. There was times that they made plays and then they just kept coughing up the ball, and that really played a factor. And the thing is, the Commanders don't really necessarily have a really bad defense. It's just that combine that with their up and down, inconsistent offense that they just can't seem to win or finish games sometimes. So they're another one of those teams like Denver where they're kind of like fighting pretty hard, but they just can't seem to win all the games they should be winning. And, of course, they have played a division rival, and everyone – I think they were 14-point underdogs in this one, the Commanders.
Yeah,
they ended up winning.
No division team should ever be – because division games are weird. And here's the thing with them. So here's Jalen Hurts did not play well. Like, he had a rushing touchdown. I think he threw for a touchdown or two. He wasn't like dog water, but he did not play well. He did not play up to his ability. He reverted back to some of his old habits.
Right.
You'd rather see that in the middle of the season than at the end of the season. So what I would say is, given his track record and his work ethic, I am optimistic he's going to turn it around. That is what history is a great predictor. It's a predictor I use myself. With that being said, because he's only really been a good passer this season, there should be some worry. When I looked at the game, I believe Washington had the ball for like, I want to look it up right now, like 30.
They had, I remember they were talking about that. They had it for almost
40 minutes. I think it was 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And Jordan Davis is who the Eagles drafted. He probably wasn't a first rounder to a lot of teams, but they had a big weakness for stopping the run. And so they got him because that's what that big, strong man does. The problem is when he was out, and so he went out 2 weeks ago, and the Texans ran for like 180. So today they signed Linval Joseph from Minnesota. He's a run stopper. And they also signed, that was technically yesterday, and they just signed Ndamukong Suh to help stop the run. So my question was, and this was weird because Philadelphia is pretty forward-thinking, and they're problem solvers. Why did it take so long? Because those guys have been out in the open market forever. But this also goes back to Hurts. I know it's weird to say that because he doesn't play defense, but there are times like, I'll go with my favorite quarterback ever, Peyton Manning, where his defense is ass and the other team's running on them, and it's like, oh God, we're crappy Tampa 2, and we finally forced them to kick a field goal even though they had the ball for 7 minutes. I got to score. And then he was just like 3 plays later, Marvin Harrison, boom, touchdown. He's like, fuck you, bitch, I'm Peyton Manning. That's why they call me the sheriff, or whatever the fuck it was John Gruden's dumbass used to fucking say. It never made any sense to me. But I don't expect Hurts to be Peyton Manning. But you know what would be great if your defense is gassed? Get a couple first downs. Maybe make a play with your legs. Maybe get them rest. Set up the deep play and then abuse the teams, the deep pass with all those guys. And he just didn't have it. I will give him a small pass for this. He never checked out of that game. He was always playing hard. There are a couple of drops in there, a couple play calls I didn't really like necessarily. I don't think, I said about Philly and Buffalo, I felt like they're the 2 best teams, but they're the 2 best teams in a NFL that's a little diluted this year. They both showed flaws. They are not remotely close to locks for the Super Bowl or necessarily making a championship game. Although it would be catastrophic for the Bills if they didn't make at least the championship game.
Yeah, that will lead me into our NFL top 5 power rankings. So what I'll do is I'll list theirs. Then you and I will go start breaking down our top 5. So let me see here. And I guess this might have been, I don't know, it was just like yesterday, so it's interesting. So, okay, so the Eagles are their number 1. They got the Chiefs at number 2, Vikings at 3, Dolphins at 4, and Bills at 5. You and I, we're going to start from 5 on down to 1. So who do you have at 5 in your top 5?
So I struggled between Miami and the Niners because I like to look at my I like to look at the big picture for the teams, but I also like to look at where are they now and did they make any additions, right? So the McCaffrey addition, while I'm kind of like about it because he costs a lot of money and he's injured a lot. When he's on the field, he's the best running back in football. He's arguably the best offensive player in football who's not the quarterback, of course. I ended up going with the Dolphins because Tyreek Hill is having a historic season, and Tua, he was never as bad as his stats and circumstance made him look in early Miami, and I was pretty consistent about that. My thing with him was how bad was those legs and hip injuries because he doesn't throw the ball the same velocity as he used to, and he's never had a huge arm either. But he has chemistry with his guys. He's getting the ball to them just well enough. They're a tough out, and Tyreek Hill is showing that it wasn't just Patrick Mahomes who made him look good. Tua's an above-average quarterback. He's tough as nails, and the Dolphins are a flawed roster, but they have enough talent at the top end positions: left tackle, wide receiver, pass rusher. They can play with anybody. So I gave it to them. Also partially because they have been better. They've been a good team longer than the Niners have this year. Because early on, the Niners did not look good.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting this year so far. Like, you know well that I'm not a big Justin Fields guy. And I wasn't really a big Jalen Hurts guy either. So when I watch these guys play this year, it's like I see the improvement in Fields a little bit. I still think that last game, like, he made some of the mistakes that he shouldn't be making, but he's still young. But I've seen some improvement there also, so I could see why Chicago really likes him. Jalen, the same thing. You and I have been going back and forth about this. I'm just kind of waiting for the bottom to drop out with Hurts, and you kind of mentioned him going back to old ways this week. But I'll expand on that more as we get there. But another quarterback who I think, and I totally agree with you, is a bit underrated is Tua. And, the thing for Tua is people are kind of saying he's not that great, but I'm like, you have to understand this team has been going through this transition, trying to rebuild and try to find the right pieces, the right coaching. And this year they're not winning everything, but they're winning a lot of games, and they're doing it because Tua is playing much better. And Tyreek Hill's a big part of that. The defense is a big part of it. And the thing is, I like about Miami, come the trade deadline, they said, we need a defensive player. Denver, we want Chubb. So we're going to make the trade. We're going to try to get some more defense over here. They're still struggling a little bit here and there with different things, but this is a team that's kind of growing. And it's actually at the right time because despite Buffalo kind of being the better team in the division, New England still hasn't quite found their niche yet. They're still kind of rebuilding after the Brady era. And the Jets are still in that transition too. So they're still kind of struggling.
All three of those teams are playoff teams if it started today. That's the crazy part of it.
Right. So at number 5, I agree with you. It's the Dolphins.
Yeah.
Who you got it for?
Let me check my notes. Okay. I put the Vikings at 4. I did not have. They've had a great record for a very long time. For this season at least. I'm known as a Kirk Cousins defender, and the way that I look at it is I just refuse to believe a guy who makes the playoffs as often as he does, who's as productive as he is, who hits every major throw, regardless of what some of our beloved friends on the forums, think. Tape is the tape. He's not bad, and he's not a scrub. So I have a guy who I think is an above-average quarterback. Justin Jefferson is in that crazy long list of guys who you could argue is the best player at his position. Dalvin Cook is healthy, and when he's healthy, he's really good. Oh, also, and just to your point about a couple points we made earlier, the Vikings have a shit offensive line. They are not good at all.
Right.
And if a scrub like Kirk Cousins can figure it out, surely the vaunted Russ could. But my point with that is they're a flawed team, and their record is inflated. They're not as good as they look. But they bounced back from that horrible Philly loss. They're beating teams in their division who have historically given them issues. And the most important thing is their defense isn't great, but it's solid. And so when you have an offense that can run the ball, even with a bad line, who, you can get something out of Thielen, and Justin Jefferson is what he is. They're 7-1 or 8-1. They're to me, they're really more like a 6-win team. Like if this was a 16-game season and they played in an average division, I would think that they were a 10-win team. But this is the NFL this year, and so in a year where almost everyone else has been inconsistent, they have been consistent, and that's enough to get them to the 4 spot for me.
For me, it's actually the Chiefs. They drop a little bit, mainly because it's despite my belief in Patrick Mahomes. I see that they're still struggling a bit on offense. The chemistry is not quite there yet, and I don't know. I don't have as much faith in them in this year as I usually in the past, and I think one of the reasons why they're still kind of favored in a lot of things because the rest of the division kind of sucks. So I think if Denver or even Los Angeles was better, or even Las Vegas, if they were even as good as we thought they might be this year, they probably would have more losses on their resume, I think, at this point. So as we know, with rankings, each week can change from week to week. So I might think Chiefs are down here at 4 now, but I might think they're number 1 next week. You just never know.
Well, last time we did this, we had the Bengals in the top 5, and then Chase got hurt, and then Zach, the head coach, was like, "We don't need to run the ball against the Chiefs. We need to throw it 60 times. That'll be great."
Right.
So shit happens.
Number 3 for you.
This is. I don't think that this is going to be too controversial. I had a tie. So I tied between the Bills and the Eagles. To me, they're teams who have quarterbacks who are front runners for MVP. They have a complete team. They both stumbled recently. The Eagles stumbling has only resulted in 1 loss. The Bills they stumbled against the Jets. Again, good defense, divisional game on the road. It's not a huge sin to lose that game. This last loss was pretty bad for a variety of reasons. So I put them at 2 and 3, mostly because I see them as the Eagles have the better overall roster, but Allen is better than Hurts. The Eagles, in my opinion, have better coaching. I couldn't differentiate between the two really. I do think that the Bills have had a tougher schedule, so I just kind of called it even and said you could flip-flop them wherever you wanted. Gun to my head, the tiebreaker for me usually is the quarterback, so I'd say Bills. But the Eagles have I think, as good of an argument, if not better overall, so sliced it up that way.
My number 3 actually is right up there with the NFL, and that's the Vikings. And one thing that's working in favor of the Vikings this year is their chemistry and their belief in each other. It goes beyond that, like you said. Sometimes they'll give up big plays on defense, but somewhere along the line they're going to create a turnover, or like even when we thought the game was over against the Bills, they found a way to got that turnover when they couldn't hold on to it, and even then when they had to go to overtime and Allen's driving. And then they intercept them. So, they find ways to win. And then I always go back. You and I always had that discussion about Cousins when he was in Washington. I know Kirk isn't viewed as, this big-time guy. But there's got to be something said for when Washington drags him out for 4 and 5 years without paying him, but they won't let him go. And so that means that he's got value. And then finally, the Vikings said, "Okay, yeah, we see you, Kirk. We see you. So we're gonna give you the money, and we're gonna pay you to be our guy." And so
they haven't made it back to the NFC Championship game, but Keenum isn't a starter, and that was the people who were like, Keenum's better than Cousins. And that just flabbergasted me because I would be embarrassed to say that. I would be embarrassed to think it, let alone say that shit out loud. But to your point. It's hard to say that this guy sucks when a bad organization let him go and a good organization keeps him around and he keeps producing. I get it. He is Andy Dalton-esque in many ways in regards to playoff performances and stuff like that. But, if you have him, you have a chance. And while people might scoff at that, I'm old enough to remember, you are too, when the Browns had all these great rosters who could sniff the playoffs. I remember, as you did, when the Dolphins had some really strong rosters and couldn't make the fucking playoffs. And that type of list goes on and on and on. And while a lot of football fans love to scream, Super Bowl or bust, when you go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years without making the playoffs, all of a sudden a Kirk Cousins looks pretty good. That's what it is. He's never, aside from 1 or 2 years, maybe he's never been a top 10 guy. But what I can tell you is Kirk Cousins would look real good in Denver right now. He'd look real good in Pittsburgh right now. He'd look real good in a lot of places, and a lot of teams would be better with him, regardless of whether his arm is sexy or not.
Well, it's funny you brought up the Browns because, like I said, Kirk's biggest demon right now is his second half of the year. Like, they've got a lot of momentum. They're winning ball games. Can he carry that into the playoffs and deep to the point that maybe get to a Super Bowl? But he reminds me of a former Browns quarterback who wasn't sexy either, by the name of Bernie Kosar.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they have a similar style of play, and Bernie never got to a Super Bowl, but he was competitive as hell. So, like, I never really think that Kirk isn't competitive. Like, Kirk always tries to win. He just doesn't get it done all the time, and so people look down on that. And he may never get to the Super Bowl, but right now, the way they're playing as a collective, you never know.
But a lot of guys, so a lot of people are huge Lamar Jackson fans. And it's not an indictment on him. How many Super Bowls has he gone to? Remember in 2019 when they had 7, himself included, All-Pros, 7 All-Pros? Like, it's hard to get that on a Madden team. And they were one and done. There are a lot of guys out there who are wonderful quarterbacks, like Matt Stafford. Everyone shit on me for years saying this guy's the fucking truth, and his stats are a little inefficient, but you got to look at where he's playing, this, that, and the third. And then last year he did what he did what he did. There are a lot of times we like to throw all the blame on the quarterback. We could talk about, and I'm a Mike Zimmer guy for a variety of reasons, but they got a whole lot better when Zimmer showed up, and then he overstayed his welcome because he's kind of a crotchety old man. And now they're better, and Kirk Cousins is playing a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
How come there's no blame for, albeit a pretty good head coach, for a head coach who's not fired? So Kirk Cousins, the Washington made a meme out of him when they got his name wrong on purpose, because that's real fucking professional. And it's like, I got his first name wrong because I'm fucking funny. I also just gave him $30 million for the franchise tag or whatever it was. So, like, fuck that franchise, by the way. But at the end of the day, Kirk Cousins is probably better than the quarterback for the viewers' favorite team. That's what
all I know is if you can go and you can win a Super Bowl with Trent Dilfer or fucking Brad Johnson, I know that Kirk Cousins can do it. So, again, it doesn't mean he's going to do it, but stranger things
if he
happen.
did. I will be so insufferable to some people. I got some posts.
Yeah. Okay, number 2, who you got?
Again, it was the Eagles-Chiefs thing.
So you thought
the Bills-Eagles. I would probably put the Bills there, like, gun to my head, because they have Josh Allen. What I will say for them, and this is what's concerning, Gabriel Davis is their number 2. He's a big play wide receiver. He's not consistent, which you kind of get with that, but he's really a number 3. They don't have their tight end, I believe, has kind of been underperforming recently. He might have gotten hurt, and they don't have a good running back. So they are really just a good, not just because they're a strong team, but they're Josh Allen, a nice offensive line, some schemed plays, and Stephon Diggs. So they have enough on offense, but it's just enough. And I would have liked to see them be a little more active on the trade market. I know they wanted to get McCaffrey, but they didn't pull the trigger. And I know I've been touting the Bills as a Super Bowl contender, but even on this show, I have said they were a little top heavy on offense before. So it's not like I'm changing my guns, but they have Josh Allen. They got Josh Allen.
Yeah, I got the same pick. I know they're struggling. I know that they're having some issues here and there. And I agree with it 100%. Like, the running back is like the weakest link on that team. And like, they kind of, as good as Allen is, as good as that receiving core is, like, they kind of forget that, you still got to be able to run the ball and keep those defenses honest, because they'll start pinning their heirs back and coming after Allen. I know Allen can run around, but the last thing you want is for that guy to get killed because he has to run around. So
he already has an elbow. He already got that elbow dinged up. Now,
right,
granted, that was in the pocket, but you can get hurt in the pocket too. That's where Lamar had his big injury, ironically. It didn't happen where you would have thought. Tom Brady popped his knee in the pocket. You can get hit and hurt in the pocket.
But, the good news for them is we're still kind of like towards the middle of the season, so they got time to right the ship.
And they're not been uncompetitive. Like
they can score points. It's just they make the mistakes at the wrong times. And
they're deep, bro. Yes, I want to talk on that just real quick. Last year, we were both talking about how their defense is amazing until the very end of the game, and they just fuck up. They did that against the Dolphins. They did that against the Jets, and they did that again against the Vikings. I don't know what. They have a real good defensive head coach. They have to tighten that shit up. There's something about the end of the game that is not clicking for that defense, and it's the second season in a row. That's a problem.
Yeah. All right. Well, who you got at number 1?
I took the Chiefs. I have them there. It's kind of like the same thing I said for the Vikings. In a season where everyone is inconsistent, the Chiefs have been very consistent. I agree with you that they don't have a ton of chemistry on offense, but they have what you're seeing on offense now. This is old school Andy Reid when his number 1 wide receiver was James Thrash. And to any listener who remembers who James Thrash is, kudos to you. Good God, Freddie Mitchell, good old Fred X, and that's one of the first NFL memes ever. But
wasn't that when he had McNabb as quarterback?
Yup, and Rodney Harrison. Freddie Mitchell was jawing with Rodney Harrison, and it was bad. It was very bad for Freddie. It did not go well, and he was out of the league in 2 years. But he's spreading the ball around. They have guys who are at least capable starters, even though they're just kind of like just another guy. What's interesting is they got Kadarius Toney, who just went off last week. Toney has been a malcontent in New York. Part of it was his coaches were dipshits, reading between the lines. He's super talented, but he's injury prone. And so if he can stay healthy with his speed, just kind of ad-libbing with Mahomes, it's gross. Their defense has been a little bit better than I thought. They're surviving the Frank Clark suspension. I can't believe he only got 2 games, but I can because it's the NFL. That's a different fucking rant. But the Chiefs have been, since week 1 to now, a high-level team. They're not screwing the pooch. Typically, this is a time of the season where Mahomes stumbles a little bit, so I might be on the lookout for that. But they are, last year, humbled them, and they're not talking near. Maybe part of it is because Tyreek's not there, because he's a fucking talker. But they are very much more business-focused, business-oriented than they have been in the past. And that actually is scarier, because a focused Kansas City team that doesn't do the stupid penalties and give Tom Brady the opportunity to beat them, or the stupid 4th and goal situation against the Bengals, when they get away from those mistakes, they're front runners and they stay out front for a long time. So that's who I have at 1.
For me, it's the same as the NFL. The Philadelphia Eagles, surprisingly. I'm not really bothered by this loss. We've seen it a lot of times. It's hard to go undefeated in the NFL. And a lot of the mistakes that happen with Philly were just things that you probably don't normally see. They don't usually drop the ball that much or have those kind of turnovers.
It was like a high school game.
Yeah, and it's all going to come down in the end to Jalen. Like, does he keep up what he's doing? Does he keep playing well? But I'm not really going to slight them for this one game. And because of some of the issues that the Bills are having right now, because like Allen is way better than Jalen Hurts. But
you can be a Jalen Hurts fan, but Josh Allen is arguably the best quarterback in football.
Right.
Jalen's in the top
team,
10.
Like the fact that, and it's important to make a note of this. I didn't even realize that during the game with the Commanders is Philly had like over 175 rushing yards. Dude, that comes up big later in the year.
Oh yeah.
So if they're going to make a run, that's going to help them a lot in the NFC. So for now, that's where they are. Like, I can't deny it anymore. Like, no matter any doubts I have about Hurts, that team, much like the Vikings, they are finding ways to win. And even in the losses, you can try to talk up like, well, it just wasn't their day.
Yeah. And it was, I think the other thing is, when it's a divisional game, weird shit happens in division games. It's just
it's always tough. Like, you could sit there and watch the Ravens win and win and win, and they play the Cleveland Browns, and
it's horrible. And that's why when your team gets dominated by a division rival, that's why it hurts so much. Because not only are they beating your ass, but you know it's not supposed to be that way.
Right.
And it's, for the Commanders, they're also doing that without Chase Young, and he comes back this week, so that'll be interesting.
All right, let's get into our college football. And I actually changed something up here.
Sure.
The thing about UVA, I think we'll try to do that towards the end.
Yeah.
But for now, let's we're going to dive into the college football rankings, the top 5. I figure we do that.
Sure.
You had an interesting thing to say before we got started, so it's going to be a lot of fun going through this list.
My God.
Well, if you've ever paid attention, you've been around me long enough. I'm very controversial when it comes to college football rankings.
I know, and if I start yelling,
it doesn't necessarily mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that, like, I think that it really should be this ranking, but because of how I feel at that time, and I actually went and looked. I don't know if I did enough research like you might have, but when I was looking through the list, I was like kind of shocked. So you brought up a certain team, and I'm like, wow, okay, this is going to be fun because I got to hear what you got to say. But let me give what the college football playoff rankings are. There's a few different ones, but we're just going to stick with the playoff rankings. So at number 5, they've got Tennessee. At number 4, they got TCU, Texas Christian. Number 3, Michigan. Number 2, Ohio State, and then number 1, Georgia, and they're the returning champions, I think.
Yep.
So, let's just fucking get into it, dude. Number 5, who do you fucking got?
I have TCU.
Okay, so you do actually have them in your top 5.
I do. Yeah, they absolutely deserve to be in the top 5. They are not a top 4 team for so many different reasons, but they are.
What is your biggest complaint with them?
So my biggest complaint with them is they're just not better than Tennessee. Like, they're just like, and we can get into it now. And I want to start off by saying this. I want to admit, when I'm biased, I want to admit it so people know.
Mm-hmm.
I hate, especially in college sports, when the little guy gets the benefit of the doubt because they're the little guy and they're the feel-good story. And that is exactly what this is. I don't care that they're warm and cuddly and it's a feel-good story and it reminds people of their beloved UCF or Boise State or the Bearcats last year or any of that fucking bullshit. It's about who are the 4 best teams.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have, and I can cover it at the same time too. I have TCU at 5. I have Tennessee at 4. And it baffles me that TCU is at 4, that it's not swapped. I'll tell you why. The Tennessee Volunteers, they beat LSU, they beat Pitt, they beat Alabama when Alabama was ranked 3, they beat Kentucky when they were ranked 19. They had the audacity. They committed the cardinal sin, the unforgivable sin in the fucking eyes of these idiots who fucking put this list together, that to lose to Georgia. How dare they lose to the best team and defending champions? That's their cardinal sin, is they got beat convincingly by the hands-down best team, the odds-on favorite to repeat, the Georgia Bulldogs. Meanwhile, the vaunted TCU Horned fucking Frogs, let's look at their wins. Oh, they beat Oklahoma, like that was fucking impressive, but they were ranked at the time. They beat Kansas, like that was impressive, but they were ranked at the time. They beat Oklahoma State. I'll give you that. That was somewhat impressive. They beat Kansas State, like that's impressive, but they were ranked at the time. They slapped fucking West Virginia. Okay. I mean, they beat them by 10, but I felt like that game, the score didn't show really how far away that game was. So let's go back 2 weeks when the poor Volunteers made the cardinal sin of losing to Georgia. Okay. They lost to Georgia and then they beat the fuck out of Missouri. 2 weeks ago, the TCU Horned Frogs, the horny fucking frogs, they went out there and they destroyed the dominant Texas Tech by 10 points. But then last week, they beat the 18th ranked Texas Longhorns by a touchdown. Why do I keep focusing on 2 weeks? Because if you look up until those 2 weeks, if anyone said TCU was better than Tennessee, no one would have believed them. But the committee is trying to fucking tell me that losing to Georgia and then a team leapfrogs you, I guess that's what fucking frogs do. They frog you by beating Texas Tech. If I lose to Georgia and you beat Texas Tech, even though I've beaten better teams than you, you're magically better than me. And then when you play another crappy ranked team, the Texas fucking Longhorns, and I don't even know how the fuck they're ranked, to be quite honest, and you beat them by a touchdown, that is monumentally more impressive than me slapping the fuck out of Missouri, another SEC team. Like, I don't get it. I don't understand. It doesn't make any fucking sense to me. Like, I can only, and I mean this sincerely, I can only imagine that the voters, when they were voting, if they were fucking just going, I love TCU, woo, little guy, that always works out great in the fucking goddamn college playoffs, that they're like, you know what, I think Tennessee would lose to TCU on a neutral field. And maybe, but I don't think that's how anybody would bet it. So when I break down the teams that they've beaten, like TCU, they've beaten 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ranked teams, because I guess fucking Texas deserves to be ranked. And Tennessee has beaten 1, 2, 3, 4 ranked teams, but one of the ranked teams they beat was the third ranked team in the country at the time, the Alabama. The fact that TCU is ahead of Tennessee, it makes no fucking sense to me. And they even probably would have been ranked ahead of them when 2 weeks ago the Volunteers lost to Alabama, or I'm sorry, they lost to Georgia, and TCU beat the vaunted Texas Tech Red Raiders, or whatever the fuck they're called. I hate this ranking. Tennessee would not lose to them if they played in the neutral field. I don't even think Tennessee, in college football, if you're ranked, you're supposed to win home games. I don't even think TCU would beat Tennessee at TCU. I hate this ranking. This is the shit that makes me lose faith in it. This is why I want 12 teams, so I could just watch TCU get slapped by some 8th ranked, 7th ranked team and just be fucking done with it. It's horrible. I cannot. Maybe you have an illuminating argument. Maybe I've missed something.
I will say, I wish that this was one of those nights that Wade was with us, because he would be like trying to strangle me right now. So my top 5, I went pretty much kind of like you. I went with the quality of opponents. Now, again, it's very nuanced. So you make some great arguments about quality of those opponents and where they are now.
Yep.
However, at the time that these teams have beaten these other teams and they were ranked, you have to give them quality wins for those wins.
Yep.
So, my number 5, Ohio State. 2 wins against ranked teams this year. And yes, I know they're fucking good, but if I'm being fair, I do think schedule does play a factor. Now, we talked about with the NFL, things shake up week to week. And do I think that Ohio State will be number 5 by the end of it? No, especially when I consider what their schedule looks like this year. Yeah. But they are 2-0 against ranked teams, so they get credit for that. And that's what I have them. Now, number 4, again, this is highly blasphemous, Georgia. Two wins against ranked teams. Now to their credit, this is going to your point. Even teams that aren't ranked, they are wiping the floor with those teams, and that's what good teams do. That's why Bama was able to stay on top of the heap for so long. Even those shitty teams they were playing, they weren't close. So even though we always laugh about, well, they just got cream puffs, well, at least they're destroying them. Like, at least you have that. Who do you have at 4?
When I pull up, can you still hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, did you say you had Tennessee there?
I had TCU at 5 and Tennessee there at 4.
Okay. So it's
it just basic. They had a lot of really good rank. The thing of it is I would have maybe them higher if they're more competitive against Georgia. Georgia really, really did just beat the fuck out of them. So, like, we've seen teams in the past have one loss and make it into the playoffs, and sometimes it's like, oh, I lost to like the number 4 team or the number 1 team, in the as the Cardinals sin. But I can't have them much higher than that or try to justify it when they got handled like that.
Who do you got at 3?
So I have Ohio State at 3. Okay. I the way that I look at them, they have 2 ranked wins. You wish you did see more, but they've killed everybody else that they've played. I'm going to admit something that a lot of fans do and that the committees also do. I will look at who you are and what your overall track record has been, and I will use that sometimes as a tiebreaker if I think it's close. And so with Ohio State, they have a hell of a fucking college quarterback. I don't know how good he'll be in the pros. They have all kinds of weapons. Marvin Harrison Jr. is taking after his dad. But when I broke down some of the stats, and one of my favorite college football guys is Joe Klatt from Fox Sports. He's real good. And I was going to have Ohio State at 2. But over the past, I can't remember how many weeks, it was somewhere between 2 and 4. We'll call it 3 weeks. Marvin Harrison Jr. has had almost 50% of all of their catches in passing yards. So they weren't, when this team was put together, it's Ohio State, they try to stack weapons. That's what they do. That's what you're supposed to do. But recently they've become really dependent on just a couple of guys. And in college football, where so much of the fight is based off of how many 5 stars do you have versus how many 5 stars I have, which is why I think Jaded secretly loves college football so much. Shout out to Jaded. Beloved Jaded. I was like, ooh, they're a little top heavy. Let's be honest. If they lose to the Wolverines, they might be done. They might be out of the playoffs simply not because they wouldn't be deserving. I mean, they're definitely better than TCU, but they're only going to have 2 ranked wins, and they'll have a cardinal sin of losing to a highly ranked opponent, which, as Tennessee showed us, you just cannot do. It's much better to be average ranked teams than to dare to do that.
Well, number 3 for me will probably be the most controversial outside of my number 1, but number 3 for me is LSU. And most of my I guess my love that I'm giving to them is because they're playing very well recently. Like, they're starting to catch fire. They started out the season a little rough. They lost to Florida State to start the year by like 1 point. But now Florida State is ranked, so you can kind of sit there and say, oh, okay. But they're 2-1 against ranked teams. They're playing pretty good ball. They're not like blowing anybody out per se, but they just play good defense, and they're getting it done. And I think they're stronger because of that. So they're like the Broncos, only they win. So yeah. So I have LSU at number 3.
Now they did lose to Tennessee, who, as we know, committed the cardinal sin of losing to Georgia. I am just reminding you of that because the committee is telling us that clearly the LSU Tigers suck because they lost to a team that lost to the. Now, to your point, I think you'll find this interesting. people were talking about paths towards LSU getting back into the playoffs because theoretically you could have the fourth team being a 2-loss team, right? It could happen.
Right.
And part of it is TCU. If we're being honest, the second TCU loses a game, the voters are going to be done with them because they're cowards and they won't have the courage of their convictions. So they won't double down on being wrong. They just want to pretend that they're not wrong now because they're cowards. So I'm glad that you and I are now rooting for TCU to lose. Welcome home, brother.
Well, this show is called Poetic Carnage for a reason. So my top 2 is going to turn the world upside down. So at number 2, Tennessee defeated 5 top 25 teams but lost to 1. The crime? Losing to Georgia.
It's just unfathomable. I mean, it's just, oh my God, I'm actually getting frustrated.
Yeah, but Tennessee's been really impressive this year. In fact, that Alabama win was one of my favorite moments of the year. So
I bet you fucking love the shit out of that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because they've been that team that they keep talking the last few years that, oh yeah, they're gonna make it. They're gonna make a run this year, but then they lose like 3 or 4 games, and then they weren't quite there yet. But they seem to have put it together this year, and they look pretty good.
It matters. Like it's they remind me of Michigan in the sense that when you have a good coach and you have good talent, that matters. But if you don't have the quarterback, it's night and day for when you do get the quarterback. And to quote you, that hooker is a hooker. Like the hooker is out there. There's talks that he's going to be a first-round draft pick now. I don't know if that's fair or not.
Yeah, I'd have to look at more of his game film. I'm not sure if I'm feeling that, but we know how it is. Like if you don't have many to choose from, somebody's going to take him.
Yeah, except last year.
So who do you have at number 2?
I was pretty safe. I put Michigan there. I like Michigan more than Ohio State. Ohio State has the better quarterback. I don't know if they have the better coach, and that's where I always start with my analysis in football in general.
It's kind of amazing how good Harbaugh is. I know Harbaugh started the last couple of years, but he has a way of winning.
And they did good to not fire him, and NIL has helped them recruit. Michigan's a big brand, but it's hard to get kids to go play in the snow. Like if we're just being honest. But when they can get some of those sweet NIL dollars, as they deserve, it makes it a little bit easier. They run the ball. They beat the shit out of you. They will run the ball. They haven't been down a whole lot this year, but even if they're down, they're going to continue to run the ball. They have the quarterback. Their defense is loaded. For them, and this is what I fear. I fear that they'll lose to Ohio State. Pardon me.
Where's the game this year?
Shit. Actually, hold on. I'm going to Google it right now.
Okay.
I think it's at Ohio.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Because I think last year was in Ohio.
And it's dope that they don't do that on a neutral field and they actually because the students deserve to see that shit, in my opinion.
Yeah, doesn't Oklahoma and Texas play on a neutral field?
I'd have to double check. I don't know.
For some reason I think they do, but I'm not sure.
In that, yeah, and I don't like the neutral field stuff because like the students, especially with all those loans they're taking out, deserve to see some fucking football in front of them. But if they lose, whoever loses Ohio State versus Michigan, there's a lot of people who think that the loser will be out. And I will tell you this, if Ohio State or Michigan, if they lose and one of those, the loser is out and TCU gets in, it will be a crime and shame because there's nobody on God's green earth who believes that TCU would beat either of those teams. At some point, common sense has to prevail. It cannot just be a naked reading of records, and it cannot just be, I beat a lot of teams that were ranked, but they were 15th through 20th, so they're really not all that great because there's only really 10 good college teams each year. But,
So my number one is Michigan. No, it's not. It's Texas Christian University. But you gave me a lot of things to ponder about the lower rankings. But I was looking through it, and I guess because I've been paying attention to Texas Christian, I haven't really watched their games, but I've watched their wins, and I'm like, they go into the games and they're like, I keep expecting everyone's like, no, they're not going to beat Kansas. No, they're not going to beat Oklahoma. And then they go out there and they do it.
Yeah.
And now I know Oklahoma is like trash and they're not really a worthy team.
But we didn't know that at the time.
Right.
That's the thing.
And I don't expect these guys to stay like even in the top 5 like anytime soon. I think they will lose at some point. It's going to happen. In the end, I know my rankings are all over the place, but in the end, we all know when it comes to college playoffs that it always comes down to talent, and the teams that usually have that are always the Bamas, the Georgias, the Ohio States, the Michigans. It's always going to come down to that. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if even Tennessee falls out of the top 4 at some point. Like, I just wouldn't be shocked at it. But
if they lose again, they're done. If they lose
right.
again, they're done.
Right. And so it's just one of those things. Like I'm trying to think
did you have Georgia in your top 5?
Yeah, the only one I didn't, and which people will be mad about, is Michigan. That was the only one I didn't.
Gotcha.
But I would almost agree with you in some sense that Michigan probably should be better than Ohio State. But, Ohio State to me is just one of those teams that's very funny because I look at their schedule every year and I'm like, God, dude, they have so many cream puffs. It's like so embarrassing. And then you remember when they had that quarterback who came in on the fly, Cardell
Jones. Yeah, he was a high prospect, but he didn't win the starting job, and then he got put on the field, I think, out of necessity or seniority.
Right.
And
so
he
they went
screwed
into they went into the championship game of the conference. They were playing Wisconsin, and I think it was a chance for Wisconsin to actually make the playoffs that year. And Ohio State with Jones, they went out there and just lit them the fuck up like hard, and then they went on to win the national championship that year. So I'm like, they're just one of those teams. Like we've already talked about how Michigan's got to go there. So that makes it 10 times harder.
Yeah.
So I just have a feeling Ohio State's going to be that team to upset Michigan. It just somehow I think it's going to happen.
And a lot of people think that Ohio State's actually the best team. The issue,
and they might be.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things. Come down to I wouldn't even be surprised if I don't know. Is Bama going to be able to get back in it? But I mean,
no, they're done.
They're done.
They're done.
They got a couple losses already.
Those two losses are damning. So LSU, so much of college football is the loss when you get it and how you lose. And so even though it took everything that LSU had to beat them, LSU beat them. Their 2 losses are what they are, but they beat them. So in order for LSU to get in, you have to see stuff like, Ohio State loses and they didn't have a lot of ranked opponents, so they fall out. TCU loses and they fall out. Like, you need some very, very it's like, remember when Oklahoma got in 3 years ago and they needed a lot of things? It ended up not mattering. They got slapped around by it's either Georgia or Clemson, I want to say.
Yeah,
but
I remember
they needed I don't like Oklahoma. I don't have anything against them. I like Lincoln Riley. He's doing a lot of really good things in USC, so that'll be interesting. USC, I think, would beat TCU, by the way. I have very little respect for TCU. I think that they're like the 10th best team.
Hater.
I think that there are a lot of teams that would beat all of the teams that they beat. And it's just a very inorganic way, or very inorganic result. But it is what it is. Like, look, if they make the playoffs and win a playoff game, I'm gonna have to sit here and get mocked for at least half an hour. So like it's not like I'm not putting my money where my mouth is. But I just
that's the good thing about doing rankings like this, because I know I can just take 1 week and say, this is who I got, and they may not remain there, but
it's that's why it's harder to be an actual sports writer, and you have to do the week by week rankings and be like, I have to move this team down. I had them at 2. They got sodomized on national football. We at least have a month to do. Yeah. Like I had the Browns in the top 5 at one point, and they had an argument. Now them boys is ass.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk NBA real quick. We got a little bit of time here. Mainly because outside of Damian Lillard, I couldn't tell you who the rest of the roster is for the Trailblazers, who was my team. But because I don't keep up with the NBA as much as I should anymore, we've talked about before, you and I, behind the scenes, that ever since really the Jordan era, I just haven't really watched the NBA as much. And, we've had guys like Damon Stoudemire there and, these other great players.
Yeah, Stoudemire was so good.
But they just never got anything accomplished. And so Lillard now, at least we got this core guy. But again, it seems like there's no real help behind him. But this year seems to be playing out a little different. They seem to be getting stuff done. It's early, way early. They're 10-4, but they got a long way to go. But it's a nice start for them. You're a Lakers fan, of course.
Yeah.
And I was kind of surprised when I looked at the standings. I knew the Lakers might be struggling a little bit, but at 3-10, that's
we are ass. We are ass, and not a sweet stripper ass. We are trailer park fucking gas station burrito ass. We are not good at basketball. We are gas station burrito ass. It has not been good. I have NBA League Pass. I pay money
to watch that shit.
It's like paying money to watch a recording of you get your ass beat, but it's not a recording. It's what fucking happened the day before, and you're just I can't. That doesn't even make sense. But the Lakers, it's like the Lakers season is a fever dream. So your Trailblazers, there is a reason why they are better this year. So they made a couple roster decisions that were smart. They went to Dame and they said, look, we'll trade you if you want. We don't really want to trade you because we have a new GM and he's embattled and he doesn't want to be the guy who traded the team's most popular player ever. Dame wants to win. He also secured the bag. He signed a max deal. Y'all have a very nice player. You have a couple very nice players, but the one who comes to mind is Anthony Simmons. So when the Blazers tried to trade for Durant, when Durant requested a trade, the Nets wanted Simmons. Now, that was never going to happen. Simmons is, I'm looking at his stats right now. So he's could lower the value. In 2018, he was a 24th pick overall. So listeners who are not familiar with basketball, in the NBA, they have this horrible thing. It's called the lottery. Okay. Lottery goes up to like pick 12 or somewhere early teens. Okay. Once you get out of the lottery, you're still technically in the first round. But once you're out of the lottery, it's like picking in the second and third round in the NFL. It's just a different, NBA is just a different beast. There's way more busts. There's way more guys who are picked in the top 10 who become a role player at best, a journeyman type guy. So for the Blazers to get Anthony Simmons in the 24th pick is crazy. He's averaging 22 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists. He's a shooting guard. Dame is technically your point guard, although positions mean nothing in modern basketball, really.
Right.
He's really, there's just no way to put it. He's really good, and he's a talented guy. He fell in the draft. I think he fell in the draft for a reason. I can't quite recall, but he is playing. He's gotten better every year. It doesn't even feel like he's not going to stop improving. You also got Josh Hart. He's a 3-point shooter. He plays a little bit of defense. He's a nice role player. Here are your big additions. Gary Payton the second.
Oh wow. Okay.
He was a big role player for the Warriors, and he's a 3-point shooter, sort of like he's good enough. You have to guard him. He plays stifling defense. He's a scrapper. He was almost out of the league numerous times. His dad, the Hall of Famer, told him to retire, to quit, and it spurred him on. He played great defense. He got a contract. He's not a super exciting player, but he helps you win. But your biggest addition, your most important addition, an addition that I thought was underrated, but I did not know was going to be nearly as good. There's this player named Jeremy Grant. He is everything that an NBA team wants. He's a wing player. He's big. He's 6'8". He can guard. He's a bit of a shooter. He's good for about 21 points. He's a decent rebounder. He's like if he was an NFL wide receiver, he's definitely not Randy Moss, but he's like a number 2 possession guy. He's like an Anquan Bolden, just to give you like a really rough comparison. He is the type of dude. He's that second level fringe all-star caliber player. He was with the Nuggets, and he was really good there. Then he went to Detroit, even though they offered him the same contract as the Nuggets, I think because he has family there, and he got traded. To the Blazers. He's just a good player. So your team is overperforming from where people thought that they would be because they made it. They swung a trade that people didn't think they were going to hit, and they have a young developing player who's really taking off.
Yeah, because I remember we had another guard by McCollum, and he was really good. So I'm assuming he was traded out somewhere.
Yep, he was traded to the Pelicans.
Okay.
They were going to have to pay him, and McCollum and Damian Lillard were a wonderful backcourt. But the reality of the situation is you had Anthony Simmons emerging, and McCollum was going to get paid a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it didn't make sense.
Yeah, they are both scorers, so it's really tough to.
Yeah.
So what is going on with the Lakers? Like, what is their problems this year? I mean, is James just too old? Is it time to hang it up, or is it just coaching? What is it?
The coach, I think, is decent. It's hard to judge him. We have a team that plays good defense, so you'd expect to be better than a 3-win team. The issue is that we don't do the things that matter in modern basketball. So 3-point shooting is at a premium. Well, at one point, we were on pace to be the worst 3-point shooting team in NBA history, and we would have shared that distinction with the 2015 or 16 Sixers. That team was designed to tank. They were literally trying to lose games. So we can't shoot the 3. We're not a great free throw shooting team. Anthony Davis is one of my favorite players ever. He's a University of Kentucky guy, and he's frustrating because there are nights you watch him play and you're like, yep, he's as good as almost anyone in the league. But he's always kind of dinged up. James is hurt. Westbrook, who I despise, I have to be fair. He's coming off the bench. I wish he did that last year so we could have maybe contended, but we didn't get our good coach fired. But he's coming off the bench. He's playing well. He's still inefficient. He still takes too many shots. He still takes too many threes. He still has horrible turnovers. He's still really not that great on defense. But he can't shoot free throws to save his fucking life. But he is playing better. He's doing what's asked of him. So, kudos to being a professional, I guess. But the real big issue with him is his contract is ginormous, and it stops us from getting other players who are better at modern basketball. So we are just here's another way to put it. If you look at our roster, there are some guys that we were counting on to be as good as they used to be. Kendrick Nunn comes to mind. Patrick Beverley comes to mind. And we desperately needed them to return, not even to return to form. Like, Nunn missed last season because he had a really nasty thigh injury, I want to say. Patrick Beverley was pretty good last year, but he hit 35, but he's a 3-and-D player. Patrick Beverley thinks that he is now the second coming of Stephen Curry, and Kendrick Nunn is just physically broken at this point. So when you have those two guys who are hurt, and there are technically some of our better shooters, James is dinged up. Anthony Davis is dinged up. That's basically the list of guys who can play NBA caliber ball, other than Austin Reeves and a couple other guys like that.
But aren't those guys like much older now? Like, aren't they aged
Yep.
out almost? Yeah.
So LeBron's 37. I mean, last year he was a top 5 player. The issue is he hurt his groin again, and that's what he injured his first year in LA when he had. The joke was it was LeBron and the kids, all the guys that they traded for Davis.
Yeah.
They were the fourth seed, and then he injured his groin, and then they just bottomed out, and then traded them immediately for Anthony Davis in the offseason. So Davis is like 28 or 29. Patrick Beverly is 34. So he's at that age where it's like you only got 1 or 2 seasons left. None is 25. It's just that he's a scorer, but he's little, and he's a warrior. Well, I mean, he's a Laker, but you know what I mean. But he's just it looks like he's physically shot. We just don't have the shooting, and we can't I watch these games where we're playing great defense, championship caliber defense, and it's like the other team scores 3 times in a row and it's over. Like that, it's like the other team made two tough jump shots in a row. We're fucked. It's so demoralizing. And we have a good head coach who was sought after, and he's very strong schematically, and he used to play in the league, so he's respected. And the reality of it is that we just don't have the horses to win the race. And so I don't know. I have thoughts on what the Lakers should do for the future, but that would be very long-winded. So basically I will close with this. We don't have enough good players. Everybody else has more good players than we do, and we old. That's it. That's what it is.
Well, I'm sure we'll revisit this down the road as the season goes along.
Yeah, you hate the Lakers. You can't wait to talk about it.
But to get ready to close out the show for this evening, I got some sad news to report. As a Virginia Cavalier fan, this past Sunday there was a shooting on campus where 3 UVA players, NFL or football players, were killed. One of them being a highly talented wide receiver, Lavelle Davis Jr., unfortunately, as well as Deshaun Perry and Devlin Chandler. Apparently, it was another former player of the team. They don't really know exactly why he did what he did, but he apparently walked on the bus and shot one of them while he was sleeping, and the other 2. And then there was a couple other people shot, but they survived and they're still in the hospital. But just wanted to give my condolences out to the families of those players, and hope we can get some answers of what happened here. It was just a big tragic event. I was kind of surprised initially when I heard about the shooting. I thought, it must be like, a student walked into a classroom or something. But when I heard about the players, I'm like, wow, that's pretty random, So, but either way, it's unfortunate and just sad all the way around.
Yeah, I was reading that he, just before he opened fire, he pushed someone on the bus and said, "You're always messing with me." They're on a field trip or something, and people on the bus said that no one had really talked to the guy the entire time, and so he's got troubling history. I'm looking at it right now. I tried to have it memorized. I should have just.
Well, I know his dad had said something about like he complained about being bullied, but I guess his dad was like, kind of like, just try to ignore it, don't worry about it. But it's kind of weird because when you think back to, I don't want to get too deep into this, but the Columbine thing, you had much younger kids in high school that were apparently bullied before they shot up that school. And now you have like college kids basically, and you would think that they're kind of a bit more mature on that level to deal with that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. As far as like, when we find out more and more what's going on with this, like, I don't know.
He had a bad past, so in the hearing on Wednesday, shed light. So last year, or in 2021 rather, he had a reckless driving and hit and run, and he also had a concealed weapon charge that same year. So he had tried to buy guns. He had tried to buy guns, I think, unsuccessfully 2 times in the past. I remember one time he was just under the legal age limit. So I'm not going to go into gun control or any of that, because it really is more of a condolences, and I really hate this. Like I don't have kids, but I could not imagine having to bury my child, especially a college age child who had their literal whole future in front of them. And it's like university. If you get into University of Virginia, you did something right. Like, it's an academic school. To those who might not know, Virginia has one of the best law schools in the country, and they have a great business school as well. It's a place that has academic excellence, and people roll their eyes and they think that all athletes or jocks are dumb, but they're not. And those football players, they weren't just football players. They weren't just sons and maybe husbands or boyfriends or brothers or sisters. They're also individuals who had a lot going for them and had worked really hard just to get there. They were high caliber people, high achieving people, and the world it's just dimmer without them. And they died in a horrific, awful way, and may justice be served.
Yeah, that's all you can ask for. Thank you all for tuning in for this episode of Poetic Carnage. Just an update, Neko is back in town. She's back from trip. So she'll be on the next podcast for next week. And I believe we'll be talking a little bit more about UVA, but also the Idaho college tragedy recently, which is a little bit different. That's a lot worse in some ways. We'll be talking about reviews, which I've already done for your Don't Worry, Darling and Barbarian, but Neko had a chance to check out those movies. So we'll be kind of going through her thoughts with those 2 films. And then we're going to break down Metallica's Master of Puppets album. So we're going to do a little bit of that next week on the podcast. Poet, hang around, sir, as usual. Thank you again, sir, for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Love doing this show. Love talking sports with you. Your great knowledge and expertise on these things. So that's why you're here.
Thank you, listeners. You're much appreciated.
Yeah. Thank you all. Stay tuned next month. I actually have an idea for a couple of friends I'd like to get involved who are other Bronco fans. I know poor Poet's a lonely Steeler guy here, but
so sad.
Until he finds friends on that spectrum that want to come talk, this is what we're subjected to, more Bronco stuff. And unfortunately, it's the worst part of it. So, we'll see you again in a month. Hopefully things are better for our team or any team at this point. I don't want despite the UVA stuff, they weren't playing that well anyway. But either way, no sense in that tragedy there. All right, all. Keep it metal. Have fun. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time. Hang around, Poet.
See you next time.
Talk some more.
You see me for you.